Hi, good afternoon, everyone. Can you give me a heads up if you can hear me okay? Just put a yes. Yeah, brilliant. Okay, great. Nice to see everyone online this afternoon. So, yeah, 64 people in the chat room, so it's a good attendance. We are on lecture 13. I forget which week it is now. I think we are on week 8, if I remember. So it's 11, 12 weeks in the course. So we're getting towards the sort of tail end of the course, heading up towards Christmas. We'll have a Christmas break. And then when we come back, there will be some more lectures and seminars, but gearing you up for your second assessment. And yes, you should all be well underway with your first assessment so far. So I hope that's going well. We'll touch on your assessment in this session today. And I'll give you a couple of pointers and we'll also be talking about some of the theories that are relevant to your essay. So, well done for attending. This lecture is going to help you to do your essay. So it's a good turnout. Good to see you all. So yeah, this session today is all about the sociology of deviancy and social control. And we're looking at mental health and deviancy in terms of mental health. This course was designed by Mark Cresswell, has been sort of adapted over the last couple of years by Faye and myself, chipping in a little bit as well. So it's a bit of a collective effort, but the readings this week come from Mark Cresswell, and it's sort of about mental health in prisons or in women's prisons. So that's one of the readings for today. So just to give sort of Mark that credit for designing this course. Yeah, looking after ourselves. So this is the important slide, and in the chat box we were having some talk before the session started about stress and anxiety, about looming deadlines and Christmas, money issues and sort of student loans and stuff. So all of these things in the modern world are sort of pressures. And I guess in some ways we live in stressful societies, and university can be a stressful experience. So yeah, for that reason, it's good to take some note on your personal mental health. And during this seminar, we're going to be talking about sort of distressing issues such as mental illness and self-harm, which is the sort of topic for the reading this week. So these are important academic issues. My cousin, she worked at a university and she studied to become a medic. And as part of her course, undergraduate course, she sort of sat in on open, surgery and watched people being dissected and stuff, and it was all quite gory and gruesome. You guys aren't exposed to that, but sociology, we're interested in sort of issues such as mental illness, suicide. So we're in the business of talking about these things and researching these things. So it's if any of the content is too distressing, it's perfectly fine to opt out. And in addition to that, if any issues related to stress, mental health, or just general well-being and emotional well-being are affecting you, there's this web link for the student wellbeing services at BASPAR, and there's a special section there on mental health on their website as well. But by all means, feel free to talk to your tutors, the course leader, or the student wellbeing services. We're there. We've got your back, and you'll be able to receive some good advice. So. This course is interested with these 5 key concepts. You've seen them frequently, so just give you a reminder. So we're looking at rules, norms, laws, and those tend to be tied up with different forms of social control, which people and sociologists theorize of, and within those different forms of social control, you get different forms of deviance as well. So those are the 5 key concepts are the backbone of this module, and hopefully your essays are giving you an opportunity to research and talk about these different ideas. So the essay, to give you another reminder, so using 2 theoretical perspectives, discuss Howard Becker's claim in his book, The Outsiders. He claimed that social groups create deviance by making the rules whose infraction constitutes deviance, and by applying those rules to particular people and labeling them as outsiders. So in your answer, use any material taught in weeks 1 to 8. So this is week 8 now. So any material that you've been taught up to this point and this week to provide an answer. So you might think about these questions as well. So what kinds of social control does each theory that you're using suggest exists in society? So, are we talking about capitalism or patriarchy or labeling or functionalism? So it might help to clarify that in your essay. That might help your thinking. How does social control, for example, rules, norms, laws, etc., create deviance? What happens, or how are these people created? Maybe you can find an example for your essay that will guide your sort of discussion of theories. And then which theory or aspect of these 3 theories do you think offers a more accurate way or a better way of thinking about society and people and humans? Which one do you are you going to conclude with has got the best way of thinking about society? So yeah, hopefully you've got a sort of structure by now, and you're working along those guidelines. So today's session, we're going to talk about the mind-body dualism. So dual meaning 2 things. It's often sort of noted that there's a mind-body dualism in academia. And today's lecture, we're going to focus on the mind. But tomorrow morning's lecture, we're going to look at embodiment. So we're going to focus on the body and deviancy. So today is going to be the mind and deviancy, and then tomorrow the body and social control and deviancy. So yeah, you might consider the sociology of the deviancy in the mind and body. Today we're doing the sociology of the mind, tomorrow the sociology of the body. And then last point there is thinking about different forms of social control that take place inside us, internally to us, in the mind and the body. But then also social control within society's body, if you like. So if there was a big body constituted by the millions of people that live in the United Kingdom, we could, begin to think of the body in those terms, and two, the sort of like the thinking of the UK or the mental health of British society as well. You could think of it in those terms, or apply that to America or Canada or India, perhaps, different cultures of the world. So mental health, let's have a quick sort of survey. So type in the chat box, what things do you do to take care of your personal mental health? What things, can aid or improve your mental health? Destroy myself in the gym. Okay, that's an interesting one. Yeah, a lot of people say in the gym. I've heard someone say, a sociologist said once that you can't think while you're running, and I've tried it, and I think you can think while running, but I get the point. It was Bauman that said that, and I think doing physical exercise often sort of blanks the mind a little bit, doesn't it? Cry and listen to music, that's a good one. Food's an interesting one, yeah. I find myself, sort of comfort eating. I guess people do that, don't they, to sort of a way of sort of coping with stress and mental health issues. Cooking and baking, there's another one. Meditation, all right, that's a good one. So sort of clearing your mind of stress. Music, again. alcohol, yeah, I guess that's sort of, you hear about people sort of medicating themselves, don't they? Self-medication through alcohol. It's not one that I'd I couldn't would you support, but yeah, no, I can sort of I get that. I see what you mean. Um, yeah, people have sort of a glass of wine, don't they, to sort of chill out or forget about the stresses of work at the end of the day. Um, Fight my younger brother, music and booze. Okay, yeah, play Tetris. That's an interesting one. Yeah, computer games. I tend to. I'm a bit of a gamer. When I come home from work, I sort of pop on a quick computer game to sort of like get stress out of my system. I'm boxing as well. There's another one that I'm into. Is if I get a chance, going on a punch bag for 3 minutes, often gets all my stress out. So what is mental health? So it is defined by the World Health Organization. This is a good source of information. Yeah, the United Nations World Health Organization defines mental health as a state of well-being in which the individual realizes his or her own abilities, can cope with the normal stresses of life, can work productively and fruitfully, and can contribute to their community. Um, Now, that's a sort of pretty coherent idea of what mental health is. On the next slide, we'll have a look. There are some sort of other ways of looking at this, especially through the idea of sort of social control and deviancy. So if we consider this definition of mental health in terms of functionalism, I guess, and thinking about the rules of society. So there's this underlying idea that coping and working are a necessary part of mental health. So you have good mental health if you are contributing well to society, and you have bad mental health if you're not. And then in terms of moral norms, you might consider that although this definition provided by the World Health Organization does not mention anything morally explicit, there's this sort of underlying assumption that coping and working are good things because they help you to contribute to the community. So that's a sort of standard by which good mental health is valued or qualified by. So that's a sort of standard of good, if you like, if you contribute to the community. And you might consider the opposite of that. Anything bad is people that do not contribute to the community. So I've got sort of, I always think of stoners as being sort of people who drop out and don't sort of function very well in a Durkheimian sense and don't contribute much to society. So yeah. So is the assumption that not coping or working or contributing is considered deviant? Are you a deviant if you don't comply to the World Health Organization's definition of what mental health is? So that's might be how we look at that definition through the lens of this course. Okay, so let's have a quick recap. So you've been taught about Irving Goffman before on this course. What do you remember about Goffman? No, oh, by the way, there's no chat code for today's lecture, sorry. Yeah. Howard Becker's the sort of labeling theory guy, if you like. Irving Goffman sort of has some ideas that are similar to labeling theory. So yeah, there's some degree of labeling within Goffman's work, and we'll get to that actually. Good point in a moment. Yeah, well done, May. He investigated asylums and those labeled mentally ill. Any other things you remember? Where did he come from? Oh yeah, okay, that's a good one, Isabel. Yeah, so he's an interactionist. So he studies the interaction between humans, and the ways in which these things symbolize and give meaning to different people and ideas in society as well. Yeah, good stuff. I'll give you 50 quid each for your answers there. Well done. It's a night out on the town. So a quick recap. So Goffman was a Canadian-born sociologist. Sorry, I spelled that wrong. No, I haven't. No, sociologist. A symbolic interactionist. He's sort of a focus here on performativity. So the performances that people put on when they're in public, and that goes into sort of dramatology, or dramatological analysis. So thinking of society in terms of scripts. People have sort of scripts that they might have if they were doing a pantomime or a play, and that gives us a sort of convention that we stick to, a set of rules that we normally stick to, and people can sort of deviate from those scripts. And then also an important aspect of his theory is on stage and backstage appearances. So people perform or behave much differently when they're in the toilet or in the bedroom, or in taking a walk in the middle of the countryside, rather than in a job interview, or with a group of friends at a meal. We tend to sort of behave differently when we're in the presence of other people, and that performance can be understood using Goffman's theory and a symbolic interactionist approach to reading the sort of symbolism that people invest into their acts and their behavior. So yeah, another point someone raised, Goffman worked in an asylum. He was first interested in how people became categorized as mentally ill in the first place. He got himself a job as a cleaner in a mental hospital way back in the 1950s, and that's think about that. That's quite a profound thing. This guy who's an acclaimed academic at the start of his career, sort of getting a job as a cleaner, sort of a minimum wage job, as a way of sort of observing the way that mental health patients are treated in hospital. So he could observe as a participant firsthand about the lives of patients and staff, and that sort of interaction between patients and staff. And one theory he derived from this was situational improprieties. I've discussed this in my seminar group, and I'm sure many of you have. Just a recap on this then. So this is like improper behavior in different situations. You might define it in those ways. So situational improprieties. This is a quote that we've raised in class as well. So mental patients are persons who cause the kind of trouble on the outside that led someone close to them to take psychiatric action against them. Often this trouble was associated with the pre-patient having indulged in situational improprieties, so improper behavior in different situations or in a certain situation of some kind. Stigmatization as mentally ill and involuntary hospitalization are the means by which we answer these offences against propriety, or property, or the proper way of doing things. So offences against the proper way of doing things. So yeah, you might consider that the offences of different forms of deviance against the proper way of doing things, or the normal social control, or the way we're socially controlled to behave. So yeah, these quotes are taken from Goffman's book, page 268, on asylums. If you're writing about Goffman and you're interested in these ideas, you might get that book or ebook from the library. It links fairly well with Becker, and as has been pointed out, there's a bit of overlap there in terms of labeling theory. Okay, I've taken a note that students like to have an occasional break to ask some questions. So rather than me doing all the talking, have a little type in the text box, or if you want to come put your mic on and ask me a question, feel free to, yeah, give you a couple of moments to do that. Drink my coffee. If you don't have any questions, give me an N for no. Okay, good. I'd imagine it is, yes, Anya. This is like a core book, so yeah, I'd imagine it is. Often these books, because they're quite old as well, they're sort of 1950s, they're quite easy to get. The copyright is gone on these books, so it's quite often possible to find like a PDF of these books online. Yeah, so they're quite easy to get hold of. That's right, yeah, Becky. So you're linking two theories such as Goffman's theory of performance or dramatology to Becker's labeling theory. And then another theory could be Karl Marx's theory of capitalism or Judith Butler's theory of gender or patriarchy. So that's right. Is it a good read? Yes, definitely. Becker's a top guy, so yeah, get into these books. They're sort of academic books, but they're fascinating. They probably tell you more than a normal book from Waterstones would. So yeah, sometimes I buy these books and read through them. Good. Okay, we'll have another question break in a moment. A good question, Natalie. So Natalie's asked, so are we just saying how the two theorists are similar and how they're different to labeling theory? So depending on which two theorists you pick, you probably will find similarities and differences. So yeah, think about social control. What are the similarities and differences in their ideas of social control? So what are the differences and similarities to labeling and idea of patriarchy? And then what are the differences between those theories as well? And then what are the similarities and differences with the idea of deviancy as well? You might find, I guess Marx had a sort of theory of social classes, and labeling theory. We were discussing this in class the other day. Has a theory of social groups, so you might find some similarities there with labeling theory. Yeah, Sabrina, good question. Just stick to the two. Yeah, don't try to bring in too many theories. So if I were you, have Howard Becker and then two other theories and limit yourself to those three people. There will be more than enough to look at with those theories to get a good essay going. Okay, we'll have another question break later on. Okay, so so this guy, Thomas Sheff, on the breaking of rules of social interaction. So suppose in your next conversation with a stranger, instead of looking at his eyes, you scrutinize his ear. Although the deviation from ordinary behavior is slight, its effect is explosive. Conversation is disrupted almost instantaneously. So yeah, sort of talking to someone and looking at focusing on their nose or their sort of ear is such a slight way to deviate, isn't it? Rather than keeping eye contact with them or looking at the horizon, to focus on their maybe they got a wart or sort of a zit on the end of their nose, and if you sort of focus on these things, it might make them feel self-conscious, slightly paranoid, but it certainly sort of breaks the convention, doesn't it? We don't normally do these things. And that's a similar idea to Goffman. So it's a sort of improper behavior in that situation. And And we might consider that as, in terms of deviant behavior, because it deviates or challenges the sort of normal rules and conventions of conduct in everyday life. Oh, sorry about this. My slides seem to be taking a while to load. Okay, another theorist we can discuss today while we're discussing mental health would be Foucault. We've done this before in previous classes, but we can consider his idea of mental health. So recapping, Foucault had this idea of Jeremy Bentham's panopticon prison as being a sort of model for facilitating disciplinary power or biopower, which is a sort of a power shared throughout society. And for Foucault, power shapes knowledge and human culture, and it determines the discourse and the language used to convey knowledge, which in turn shapes and determines human knowledge and human culture. And for Foucault, people are socially constructed as discursive formations. If you're interested in Foucault, you should be able to find any of those key concepts in an introductory text to sociology. And Foucault's also has written and published books on madness and civilization, and also a book on the birth of the clinic. So he's very interested in sort of mental health and ideas of sanity and madness, and how the insane or crazy people become formed through language and discourse and knowledge and scientific knowledge. So he provides a history of treatment of the insane from the Middle Ages to the beginning of the 19th century. And psychiatry is an example of modern disciplinary power. Power creates psychiatry, which creates psychiatric patients that need to be treated by psychiatry. It sets up norms of mental health and disciplines people to stick to them. This is called normalization for Foucault. It creates an order of things which disordered people, sort of break and defy or deviate from. And we place our own mental health under surveillance. So we become people who watch and observe and worry about our own mental health, often comparing ourselves perhaps to the normatives, those people who are, have sort of normal standards of mental health. So through Foucault's theory, we become self-policing subjects, and we internalize these ideas of what's normal and those ideas of what's abnormal or disorderly. And another sort of theorist interested in mental health is this guy, R.D. Laing. And he argued that there's no such condition as schizophrenia. And he considered it like, as, in the same way that Becker would, a label. That it's a social fact, and the social fact is a political event. This political event occurring in this order of society or the civic order of society imposes definitions and consequences on the labeled person more completely than anywhere else in society. He or she or they are invalidated as human beings. So once you become labeled as a schizophrenia, you sort of lose your human status, if you like, which is quite a sort of strong argument about deviancy and social control, especially, social norms. So what he's arguing here is that schizophrenia is nothing innate or internal to the human. Nobody is born schizophrenia, whereas humans are labeled that way. We all think differently. We all have our own subjective way of thinking. It's just that some people's thoughts deviate from what we consider to be a normal thing for a human being to do. And yeah, there are sort of criticisms of this idea of social facts. It comes from Durkheim, but yeah, we'll get the idea from R.D. Laing. If you're interested in this, he actually opened this place or established this place. It's called Kingsley Hall, and it was a therapeutic community where people who suffered with mental health issues or disorders such as schizophrenia were sent to go mad without any medical intervention. And the idea was that they come out the other side naturally. So if they were given a sort of safe space away from sort of medical treatment and judgment, they would sort of level out or come to terms with their own state of mind in the world. So this was considered an alternative community. I don't know what happened to it. It sounds like it may have been a failed experiment, but if you go on the website today, this is now used as a community centre. But certainly it's a sort of interesting place, a place within society where deviant people or those deemed deviant by society could go and sort of be themselves, if you like. Sounds like a cult, Hannah. State types, yeah. Yeah, it would be interesting to see what the outcome of that project was. Any questions here before I go on to the next part? Again, if you've got no questions, you type no. They'll give me an idea of whether to continue. All right, good stuff. That's good to hear. Okay, so what is a mental disorder? So can you now list some mental disorders? My dyslexia is considered a disorder. I don't know if it's considered a mental disorder. It's considered a learning disorder. I know that for sure, and it has a lot to do with sort of cognition. So dyslexia may be one example of a mental disorder. I don't know. Can you think of any more? Okay, we've got schizophrenia, bipolar, depression, anxiety, OCD, depression. Oh yeah, post-traumatic stress disorder. Okay, good stuff. Depression, substance use disorder. That's an interesting one. Yeah. So I guess that would go into alcoholism and drug addiction. BPD. God, what's that stand for then, Anya? Personality disorders. Good, yeah, that's sort of an umbrella term, isn't it, Elliot, for another range of sort of disorders. ADHD, yeah, yeah, sorry, but borderline personality disorder. I forgot what ADHD stands for. Body dysmorphic disorder, right? Brilliant, Bethany. Trying to rack my head. What's ADHD? Eating disorders. That's another one. Yeah, which is interesting, isn't it? Eating disorders, are they sort of a cognitive disorder or a sort of physical disorder? Yeah, that's it. Attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. Brilliant. Yeah, borderline and narcissistic personality disorders. Sociopaths is another one, isn't it? And psychopaths. For those that are interested in psychopaths, we get lots of third-year dissertations on psychopaths, and certainly, we can take this into those realms. That you will, on your courses at some stage, study psychopathy, so you can study in these terms as well. Which says a lot about labeling, doesn't it? Really, the unlabeling theory. If someone's been labelled a psychopath for eating 20 people, is that much of a bad thing, really? Dissociative disorder. Brilliant. Okay, so there's lots of disorders out there. I think that's the point that we can get to there. Now, if you're in the medical trade, you might have a copy of this book on your shelf. This is the DSM-5, or the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders. And what this really reminds me of is like a sort of diagnostic manual that you'd have with a car. And what you can sort of do is go through stage by stage and find out, after completing stage 1 and 2, if you haven't created stage 3 or done stage 3 properly, you can check yes or no. And if you haven't, then you might go back to stage 2. If you have, you might go to stage 4, where you have to choose A, B, or C. This is in the medical industry. This sort of diagnostic manual is out there, and this is how medics diagnose mental disorders, following this sort of set of rules, if you like, or in some ways are sort of algorithmic, and you can sort of it's a bit like algebra. You sort of, if this has happened, then follow this outcome. Anyway, it's a book by the American Psychiatric Association. I guess it's sort of industry standard stuff. And there's a definition here for a mental disorder. So let's sort of pick this apart a little bit. So they define a mental disorder as a syndrome characterized by clinically significant disturbance in an individual's cognition, emotion, regulation, or behavior that reflects a dysfunction in the psychological, biological, or developmental processes underlying mental functioning. Mental disorders are usually associated with significant distress in social, occupational, or other important activities. An expectable or culturally approved response to a common stressor or loss, such as the death of a loved one, is not a mental disorder. Socially deviant behavior, for example, and this is what we're interested in, for example, political, religious, or sexual and conflicts are primarily between the individual and society, are not mental disorders unless the deviance or conflict results from a dysfunction in the individual as described above. Cool. Okay, so if you're interested in writing an essay on mental disorders, that's a pretty good sort of diagnostic definition of what a mental disorder is. It's sort of used in the industry, if you like. That book goes on to define lots of different sort of mental disorders. For example, schizophrenia is described as, or characterized as, delusions, hallucinations, disorganized speech and behavior, and other symptoms that cause social or occupational dysfunction. For a diagnosis, symptoms must have been present for 6 months and include at least 1 month of active symptoms. So, if someone comes into a doctor's office complaining of, delusions, hallucinations, problems with speech, that medic can look up or sort of run these symptoms through a diagnostics test, and it might reveal schizophrenia to be the problem. Maybe if you Google these symptoms, it might point you in the direction of schizophrenia based on this diagnostic test. Also, bipolar disorder. So bipolar disorder can cause dramatic mood swings. During a manic episode, people with bipolar disorder may feel high and on top of the world, or uncomfortably irritable and revved up. During a depressive episode, they may feel sad and hopeless. There are often periods of normal moods in between these episodes. Bipolar disorder is diagnosed when a person has had a manic episode. And there's a sort of photograph here of Goffman, because we might consider this manic episode as something that he called a situational impropriety or improper behavior in a certain or in a set situation. Okay, anorexia nervosa. So anorexia nervosa is diagnosed when patients weigh at least 15% less than the normal healthy weight expected for their height. I'll refer you as well, we've done in the past, and we'll have a look at tomorrow, the body mass index, BMI, in terms of surveillance and self-surveillance and norms of society in the lens and the thinking of Foucault. Hallmarks of anorexia would include limited food intake, fear of being fat, and problems with body image or denial of low body weight. And I think this image is quite interesting, of someone sort of looking in the mirror and seeing themselves through you know, perhaps the eyes that they feel society, or the image that they feel society sees them as being, and you know, that I guess there's sort of certain standards and norms of what we consider to be, or what society considers to be healthy or unhealthy weight, and maybe there's a sort of comparison, an irregular comparison to what other people's standards are, but definitely there's sort of an issue there of norms of society, if you like. So problems with the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders. So this was written by Mark, who's sort of done research in this area. And what he identifies as some issues with this is, first of all, it's descriptive. So it offers a diagnosis based on the description of or characteristics of disorders. And that says nothing about the cause of the mental disorders. Those causes are sort of like not inspected. We're just sort of diagnosing people based on the descriptions they give of themselves, if you like. If you interview a patient, maybe you explain what's wrong with them, and then you diagnose them according to what they say. It's not sociological. It doesn't say anything about other social causes. We're interested in sort of labeling, stigma, media influence, capitalism, but you know, we're just looking at what someone says is wrong with them as the source of diagnosis. There's another definition here. Actually, we'll come back to that. Forget you saw that slide. We're getting towards the end of the lecture now. Just waiting for these slides to upload. Yeah, so the importance of clinical significance. So general practitioners and psychiatrists make psychiatric diagnoses such as depression not based on biological tests, because there aren't any, but on whether a patient's symptoms are clinically significant. So if they say that they have something like mood swings, maybe that sort of registers as clinically significant. It signifies something. That's important for this module, because clinically significant implies there's some deviation from the norm, something stands out. Yeah, situational impropriety, some sort of improper behavior in a certain situation. Okay, we'll come back to this. Okay, so there's different models for understanding the human mind and the human body, and just the human as a whole. One is the biomedical model, and if you look at this as like biological and medical model, and it considers that to tackle mental disorders, then there are sort of medical treatments, and these drugs that we can take, such as mood stabilizers, affect the body, and you know, either add or take away different chemicals in the human body affecting the biological organism of the human body, which should then affect the thinking and the mind of the human being. Okay, someone's put some called SSRIs or SNRIs. May, do you mind expanding on that? What SSRIs are? So what is unique about psychiatry and the biomedical model is that it suggests there are some biological norms that are being deviated from in the mental disorder. So it sort of suggests that everyone's body and biology should be the same, or there's a sort of normal standard that people can deviate from. And what I'm going to introduce you now is the psychosocial model. And this offers an interpretation. Okay, let me come back to that. So this is the psychosocial model, and this defines a mental disorder as a syndrome characterized by clinically significant disturbance in an individual's cognition, emotion regulation, or behavior that reflects a dysfunction in the psychological, biological, or developmental processes underlying mental functioning. Mental disorders are usually associated with significant distress in social, occupational, or other important activities. So yeah, focus on the sort of breakdown of the word here. So bio, meaning biological, psycho, meaning psychological, and social, meaning sociological model. So it considers biology, psychology, and sociology as three different factors that affect the mental well-being of the human subject. So you can take into consideration like work life, business, capitalism, media influence when considering mental disorders, and those sort of ideas and expectations about what is norm in society. We're all confronted by those when we use social media. Perhaps we see these sort of happy, smiley people, at work or on the beach, and we might consider that that's the norm in terms of well-being or happiness or success. And comparing ourselves to those norms might cause us some degree of distress, fear of missing out, or just anxiety, which might sort of contribute to mental health issues. And there's other factors, and where do we draw the line here? Do we consider the rain outdoors, the geography? If you live in a sunny country or somewhere like England where it rains all the time. Just to point out before we finish, there are mental health laws, as we're interested in laws, rules and norms. But the Mental Health Act in 1983 and the Mental Health Act of 2007 gives the police and the government the power to deprive an individual of liberty or freedom in the absence of a criminal offence. So if someone is acting irrationally or deviating from the norms in public, causing a situational impropriety, then the police are given the power to detain and section that person against their will. Being placed on a section of the Mental Health Act means being forcibly detained in hospital because an individual is thought to be either a danger to themselves, a danger to others, their health and safety is at risk. So maybe they're about to attempt suicide or some form of harm to themselves, and they are suffering from a mental disorder. So yeah, we can think of sectioning in terms of deviancy and law. Okay, don't worry about that. I think we're getting to the end now. We'll be discussing Mental Health Act in seminars this week. And yeah, we'll look into this in more detail. I'm going to skip by these because we're running out of time. Okay, yeah, nothing. I'm happy with the way this lecture's gone. We might end on this sort of criticism of critics, if you like. So take Foucault, Goffman, Lang, and these guys out there who suggest that psychiatry has an idea or an ideal of what a human society should look like or what normal people are. It says and it suggests that people that break these norms and these rules are thereby labelled mad or insane or lunatics. But the problem with this is it comes with this idea that psychiatry is perhaps a bad or unhealthy thing to do, when in actual fact psychiatry may be the treatment and the solution to lots of suffering in society. So, where do we draw the line here? Can we criticize the critics for their ideas of and their criticisms of psychiatry? Okay, I'm going to leave it there. These slides will be available online. So to conclude, the 5 key concepts of psychiatry. So the existence of and breaking of social rules is fundamental. It's going to happen. Goffman-Becker and labeling theory is generally consistent with an anti-psychiatry framework or discourse. There is a rejection of the notion that biological norms are relevant to an understanding of mental disorder. Moral norms and the breaking of them are also crucial. Psychiatric diagnoses pick out certain people labeled immoral and diagnose them with mental disorders. So acting irrationally in public, you could well be sectioned because you are mentally disordered. And deviance is considered fundamentally the breaking of social rules and moral norms that are considered also criminal behaviours. I hope that helps. All right, we're at the end of the lecture. There's 53 people online, so any questions for the last sort of part of the session before we close? Thank you, Elliot. Good to see you. Good stuff. Thanks to everyone for joining the session. And yeah, this will be recorded and available online. So I'll see you in the seminars this week, and have a good evening.